Good morning, I'm Michael Thrasher, and I have the privilege today of talking about the work of leaders in tertiary schools of music. Regardless of the type of organization, leaders play a crucial role in shaping the culture, the climate, and the priorities of their environments. In its most fundamental sense, leadership involves the exertion of influence. This is an immense responsibility, particularly within broad and complex organizations like colleges and universities. Institutional leaders have powerful platforms from which to distribute influence, and they may do so either in ways that elevate people in their work or in ways that weigh them down. Genuine, authentic leadership is altruistic in its orientation. That is, it is a type of influence that endeavors to solve problems, to improve the human condition, and to make an enduring, beneficial impact on others. Exerting influence from an altruistic motive pattern prioritizes the interest and well-being of others. Positive leaders tend to focus on enabling and elevating stakeholders rather than simply responding to impediments. In schools of music, we often think of leadership as the work that deals with issues like scheduling, budgets, personnel, facilities, and so on. But that is only the superficial part of the job. The real work of the leader is to cultivate an environment where people can thrive and flourish. Leaders in schools of music go by many titles: chair, director, dean, coordinator, principal, rector, or many other names. No matter the title, they all have an ethical calling to advance the mission of their units and to foster an environment that is conducive to success. Perhaps nowhere is this ethical responsibility more evident than in the promotion and protection of the health and well-being of the institution's stakeholders. The total worker health approach developed by NIOSH asks us to look beyond traditional occupational safety. It challenges organizations not only to protect people from harm, but also to actively promote their health, their well-being, and their quality of life. Over the past year, my conversations with music leaders from around the world reveal an area of broad agreement, and it is this: that leaders of schools of music play a central and pivotal role in creating health-promoting environments. For example, here are a few sentiments from leading voices in the field.
By virtue of the fact that they are unit leaders, I think the responsibility lays squarely on the shoulders of all those folks. So, and what does that mean? It could mean a department chair, it could mean a director, it could mean a dean, it could mean an associate dean. It could mean even you can get down to be a little bit more granular and look at rank, right? So if I'm a full professor, I may have a lot more capital to be able to not only address those things, but then encourage younger faculty who do not have rank yet. And the other piece I'll say too is that faculty of rank can be mouthpiece for those who don't have a voice. I'm thinking of lecturers, non-tenure track faculty, adjunct professors who may have teaching environments that are not complying with X, Y, and Z. And I think it takes a really courageous faculty member who does have position and rank to be able to speak out for those folks, to speak on their behalf. So to what extent? I think to the largest extent possible that all the unit leaders should take that on.
I think they are absolutely vital. I think that message from the top is vital. And it it also needs buy-in from the bottom up.
If you haven't got the leaders on board, you can forget it.
Such thoughts are consistent with other published research. For example, in a study of health education in higher music education, Mattei and Phillips observed that endorsement from the top and suitable rewards were considered important for the success of health initiatives. Doris described the roles of leaders in promoting health within higher education environments, emphasizing that successful leadership was seen by many to involve integrating an explicit commitment to health and well-being within corporate strategy. Correspondingly, the consensus appears to be that without meaningful and substantive buy-in from music unit leaders, efforts to integrate health and wellness into a music school's culture will be cursory, superficial, and fleeting. Leaders have an array of tools available to them to help build health-promoting schools of music. Here are a few examples. First, leaders have the capacity to model, exemplify, and nurture a culture of wellness if they will choose to do so. They can do this by prioritizing a commitment to wellness through their words and their actions. They can also emphasize a commitment to health by setting visible examples of self-care, including a commitment to seeking supportive treatments when appropriate, observing proper work-life balance, and demonstrating health-conscious behaviors. Second, health should not be an afterthought in the School of Music. It should be built into the way that leaders plan, guide, and manage. Leaders can use their influential platform from which to facilitate the integration of health into other aspects of the institution's work, including course content and curricula, institutional procedures, and long-term planning. Leaders can align course meeting schedules with what science tells us about rest, recovery, and cognitive needs. Leaders can promote policies that reflect what is healthiest for students and faculty, and not just what is the normal routine. Third, leaders have opportunities to coordinate resources, to promote partnerships, to leverage sources of expertise, both internally and externally, all in support of health and wellness. This could potentially include pursuing health-related financial support, providing strategic course or time releases for faculty to develop health initiatives, or advocating for dedicated wellness staff positions, even if those are only part-time positions. And fourth, by virtue of their positions, campus leaders often serve as representatives of their institutions in discipline-wide or cross-disciplinary organizations. Through these roles, leaders have platforms from which to advocate for cultural and systemic change, including the evolution of discipline-wide health standards among accrediting organizations. We acknowledge that legitimate barriers exist that inhibit leaders from taking more substantive action in promoting occupational health in music. These impediments are not insignificant, and they require creativity, thoughtfulness, and innovative thinking if they are to be successfully confronted. 4 particular impediments and solutions might be mentioned. First, music unit leaders generally receive very little formal training on matters of occupational health. In many schools, unit leadership turns over frequently, resulting in leaders with minimal preparation for the complexity of their roles. In addition, the few formal training programs for new music leaders rarely undertake any in-depth exploration of occupational health. Therefore, more education and professional development opportunities for leaders are needed. Second, some music faculty members remain inconversant or inattentive to matters of health and well-being. This can create a culture that is reticent to address occupational health in a substantive way. For leaders, a constructive response to these perceptions is actively engaging in conversations about health, modeling healthy practices, and integrating wellness into institutional procedures. Frank Diaz from Indiana University put it this way.
Look, I think at this point, not having a position on this is anachronistic, right? So if you're a dean, a department head, a provost, at the very least, you have to have a position on this. And the reason I make that argument, especially for music school folks, is that you are going to lose students if you cannot articulate a vision for this. Well, here's one of the things kids care about now. Where's the mental health and physical health stuff? Not only that, their parents really care about it. I saw this in the New York Times. Instead of having U.S. News and World Report look at alumni donations as a ranking, why don't they look at whether students have available services to help with their well-being? So to me, I think at the very least, what it looks like is people saying we have a position on this, and we are working on it. We are working to make this happen and communicating clearly.
Third, concerns about costs and limited resources are among the most commonly cited impediments to health promotion. Perennially, leaders face the challenges of funding complex organizations within very real financial constraints. However, many opportunities exist to address wellness that require little, if any, additional funding. Some low or no cost approaches for music unit leaders revolve around course scheduling to ensure that students have sufficient time for rest and recovery, space allocation, for example, ensuring that high noise activities are conducted in large rooms or even out of doors, and thoughtful coordination of major events to avoid the effect of snowballing pressure on students. Finally, institutions and leaders may be hesitant to take more active stances on matters of health due to a fear of liability or litigation. And yet, some leaders speak aspirationally about confronting such challenges. For example, Deborah Keller of the Royal Irish Academy of Music said this.
So my inclination is not to fear the court case. Yeah. My inclination is trying to set the standards and expectations for the community to be a working and a learning community that's as safe and supportive as possible.
Such views suggest that institutions may be able to evolve to a model in which there is an acceptance of the obligation to integrate health promotion into programs of study rather than merely telling people of the risks. Adopting this premise potentially could allow for institutions to shift from a reactive to a proactive stance. In my conversations with music leaders, there appears to be a broad consensus that institutions do have an ethical responsibility to foster environments that promote the physical, mental, emotional, and social well-being of all members of their communities. We can do this through our words, actions, attitudes, and aspirations. We can do this by integrating health into our instructional content, organizational policies, and long-term planning activities. We can do this by building supportive partnerships with faculty, clinicians, and communities. We can do this by destigmatizing treatments for mental and psychological well-being and fostering practices that increase resilience. And we can do this by challenging our organizations to address these issues in a proactive manner. Klaus Larsen, principal of the Danish National Academy of Music, put it this way.
We're saying it has to do with, we have a sort of holistic view on the education that we try to provide, that when we say sustainable career, it's of course that you can make a living,
Yeah.
But having a living, you need to live.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
it has to be it has to be this our education institutions is where else should they get this information on this knowledge and the skills and the competences that are needed to actually have the best possible career for yourself.
As we think about those comments, we remember that our schools of music are dynamic, living communities. They're filled with diverse stakeholders, including students, faculty, staff, and supporters. Institutional leaders have an ethical responsibility to guide these communities altruistically. As Principal Larson said, where else should they get this information, knowledge, skills, and competencies? If not from us, then whom? If not in our schools, then where? And to my administrative colleagues, I might add, if we don't lead, then who will? Leaders of music schools can make a difference by advancing cultures in which musicians can thrive and flourish. Supporting health and well-being is essential to that work. Thank you.